reports from Cairo, Egypt, as we end today in Pakistan, where an inquiry to investigate the murder of Pakistani journalist Saleem Shahzad started. Asia Times reporter Shazad was kidnapped near his residence in Islamabad last month and found dead 2 days after he went missing. His body showed signs of torture. He'd complained of being threatened by Pakistani intelligence and had just published an exposé of a militant attack on a Karachi Navy base alleging links between Pakistani Navy officials and al-Qaeda. His murder immediately fueled speculation about involvement by state security forces. This is Pakistani journalist Mohammed Hanif.
All the circumstantial evidence points towards our own intelligence agencies, that they are somehow complicit in it. And even if they are not, it's their responsibility to trace Saleem Shahzad's killers.
Shahzad's brutal murder also raised questions about press freedom in Pakistan, and the Journalists' Union called for protests immediately after his funeral. This is Amin Yusuf, Secretary General of Pakistan's Federal Union of Journalists.
The Pakistan Federal Union of Journalists has announced 2 days of mourning. From tomorrow, black flags will be placed on all press clubs and the union office. We have given a call for countrywide protests on June 3rd. We have demanded the government to constitute a commission headed by a Supreme Court judge to investigate this incident and bring the facts to the public.
Officials say the hearings investigating Shahzad's murder will not be open to the public or the media. Pakistan's largest English-language daily newspaper Dayan recently reported leaders of Pakistan's Supreme Court, Bar Association, and Human Rights Commission will observe the proceedings. In a recent ruling, Pakistan's Chief Justice Iftikhar Chowdhury also advised the government to make the findings of the inquiry public. Immediately after Shahzad's murder, Human Rights Watch said the Pakistani government should establish an independent investigation into his killing and, quote, look into other allegations of serious human rights abuse by the Pakistani military's Inter-Services Intelligence Agency, known as ISI. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, Pakistan is one of the most dangerous countries for reporters. Earlier this month, 32-year-old journalist Waqar Kiani was badly beaten just days after he published an account of his 2008 abduction and torture by suspected Pakistani intelligence agents. Kiani works for the Guardian newspaper. We're joined right now by Ali Dayan Hasan, a senior researcher for Human Rights Watch's Asia division. Previously, he was the senior editor of Pakistan's premier independent news magazine, Herald. He joined me in studio just after show yesterday, and I asked him to talk about the murder of Pakistani journalist Saleem Shahzad.
Saleem Shahzad was a journalist who specialized in issues relating to terrorism and counterterrorism. His work was not regarded as mainstream, but was very highly regarded. He was also a person who had contacts and sources both within the Pakistani military and intelligence agencies and also amongst al-Qaeda and the Taliban. There was always great interest in his sources. Certainly this interest was not limited to Pakistani intelligence agencies, but also other actors who were engaged and involved in counterterrorism activities. However, Saleem Shahzad remained one of those highly regarded journalists whose work, though not mainstream, was considered significant, and he was a person of continuing interest to Pakistani intelligence agencies. They would summon him periodically, they would want to know about his sources, and to the best of my knowledge, he never revealed his sources.
Tell us exactly what happened to him. What do you understand happened?
Saleem Shahzad was first formally threatened by the Inter-Services Intelligence Agency on the 17th of October 2010. He was summoned by what is referred to as the media wing of the ISI, and this was run by two naval officials, one of whom is now the commander of the naval base in Karachi that was subsequently attacked. When he was summoned, the conversation was fairly cordial, but it ended with the naval commander saying to him, we have received, we have arrested a terrorist and we have recovered information from him, including a hit list, and we'll let you know if your name is on it. Now, this may sound like good advice or friendly advice, but for those of us who have monitored media freedoms in Pakistan and and certainly the ISI's methodology in how they administer threats, it was quite clear that this was in fact a threat. When Saleem Shahzad returned from that meeting, he spoke with me. I suggested that he minute this meeting, and he sent those minutes to me, to his former employer, who is the head of the Dawn group of newspapers, and also to, in fact, the people who interviewed him in the ISI, telling them that he had placed this information with other people, and we hoped that it would act as a deterrent. Subsequent to that, I spoke to him on at least 2 or 3 occasions, and he told me that he continued to receive threats from the ISI. He had left instructions with his family, with his wife in particular, that should anything happen to him, he should get the family should get in touch with me. And when he disappeared on the night of Sunday, the 29th of May, his wife called me the following morning. Through the day, both she and I and various other people in the journalist community in Pakistan were told through unofficial sources that in fact he was in ISI custody and that he would be released by the evening, that his telephone would be switched on, his cell phone, an hour before release, that people could speak to him. And this is all part of the standard operating procedure. So we had credible reason to believe that he was in fact being held by the ISI. Of course, he was also abducted from the center of Islamabad, from what is referred to as the red zone. It's a high security zone in Islamabad. And when we did an analysis of, he was leaving his home to go to a TV studio to record an interview. And there are 9 security checkposts in that, on that route, which is perhaps a few kilometers. And really, it is not possible for anyone other than Pakistani intelligence agencies to effect the disappearance of an individual with his car at 5 p.m. from that red zone. When Shazad did not show up by that evening, I began releasing information about the fact that he had been abducted to the world through Twitter, and also spoke to friends in the media, both in the Pakistani media and the international media, and our aim was to effect his release as rapidly as possible. When he had not shown up by 1 a.m., as I had been instructed by Shazad, I began releasing the contents of his meetings with the ISI and what had happened. By the morning, it was clear, because I, on behalf of Human Rights Watch, had gone on record to say that we knew that he was a subject of continuous threats and ongoing threats by the ISI, and therefore the ISI was certainly a prime suspect in his disappearance. That afternoon, Tuesday afternoon, his body was discovered. He'd been tortured to death, and it was discovered dumped 100 miles away from Islamabad.
These allegations, the connection between the ISI and his death, they are the most direct connections that we have seen yet in Pakistan. Talk about the significance of this and what the ISI is saying. And for people who are outside of Pakistan, don't understand the significance of the ISI, would you say it's equivalent to the U.S. CIA?
I would say that the ISI is certainly the equivalent of the CIA. The difference, of course, is that the ISI is and remains the principal human rights abuser in Pakistan. Certainly Human Rights Watch, international human rights organizations, and Pakistani human rights organizations have documented extensive cases of illegal detention, arbitrary detention, mistreatment, torture, and other serious human rights abuses that have been perpetrated by the ISI and by the Pakistani military in general. These abuses are well documented, and this is an organization that has a well-established reputation as a human rights abuser. So that is the context. It has also had historically a very, very coercive relationship with the Pakistani media, where the militaries, Pakistan is essentially what you would call a Praetorian state. It's a military-dominated state which has periods of quasi-democratic rule, has had several abortive transitional to democracy, and another one is underway now. The way the military has managed Pakistan is that it seeks to control the parameters of discourse, if you will. So what it is fine with is the media being critical of politicians. However, it is not fine of the media critiquing the military or the intelligence agencies themselves at all. And those are the areas where essentially the strong arm of these intelligence agencies is found in evidence. Now, there is a long, well-documented history of journalists being summoned by the ISI, being told that they may not report on X subject or Y subject, depending on what the taboo areas of the day are. And certainly, prior to working for Human Rights Watch, which now I've been doing for almost a decade, I was a journalist in Pakistan, and I have seen my boss, the editor of the magazine I worked for, be summoned by the ISI. So there is a level of first-hand knowledge about this, and this is something that really any journalist of note in Pakistan has gone through at some point or the other. What was particularly egregious about this incident was that this was not a journalist, this was not a local journalist, this was not someone picked up in one of the outlying areas of Pakistan. This was a journalist picked up from the center of Islamabad, the capital, and he was killed. Now, when this happened, this has acted as almost as a game changer in Pakistan. We hope that it is sustainable, this game change. But essentially what has happened is that series of journalists have come out in public and have gone public with the similar experiences that they have had with the ISI. There have always been journalists who've gone public. Last year, Umar Chima, who was a reporter for a newspaper called The News, was picked up by the ISI. He was tortured very, very badly. His eyebrows were shaved, his head was shaved. He had welts and bruises from whipping all over his body. He was subjected to sexual assault, and he went public with all of this information. So there are very brave journalists in Pakistan who do speak out, but the fact is that this is the first time that the ISI has directly been held responsible. Of course, now, because I was in the unenviable situation of having done so, immediately I was told that, oh, you're part of a Western conspiracy, that this is a conspiracy to malign the ISI, which frankly I found absolutely preposterous, because as I did go to great lengths to tell everyone who was willing to listen in Pakistan, it was not my idea that Saleem Shahzad be killed. It was not Human Rights Watch advocating any such brutality, and it was the ISI that in all probability had picked him up.